I'm Sarah Bennett, 34 years old, project manager in Chicago, and I was midway through a presentation when my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. Karen, Sarah, send the $4,500 now or you can leave this family. I felt my jaw lock and the slide in front of me blurred for a second as colleagues kept talking and my hand trembled over the mouse. The words landed like a strike, sharp and absurd. I had opened a joint account years ago to help with bills when Dad lost his job. I thought I was supporting them through rough patches. That text sounded like an ultimatum and not a plea. If you have ever been pressured by family for money, write "I set a limit" or "I paid" in the comments. Stay with me because I promise you this is not just a story about a single message. It is about a pattern, months of transfers disguised as emergencies, an overnight discovery of a bank statement that read like a betrayal, and a morning after I walked away that changed everything. The first time I saw the real numbers, I could smell the coffee gone cold on my desk, hear the hum of the projector like a distant heartbeat, feel the slick glass of my phone under my thumb, taste the metallic tang of adrenaline, and see my own face in everyone else's expressions as they realized something had snapped. To understand why that message paralyzed me, you need the whole history. I grew up in a house on the north side where promises were currency and guilt was handed down like a family heirloom. My childhood had small, bright moments and a steady undercurrent of financial stress. My parents, Karen and Paul, worked long hours, and at times they were warm, but there was always a ledger in the margins of our lives where favors and loans were tracked in silence. I learned early that money was the way we proved loyalty. My sister Amy got special treatment on birthdays, not because she asked for it, but because she was charming in a way that made our parents forgive her debts and gloss over her overspending. I remember my 10th birthday when Amy got a camera and I got a secondhand sweater. I asked why, and Mom said, "You deserve different things." That phrase became a map I could not read clearly. In my teenage years, I patched holes for friends, lent cash under whispered arrangements, and kept receipts in a shoebox like evidence of my own generosity. At 25, after Dad lost his job and our bills multiplied, I agreed to open a joint account to make transfers easier. The idea was practical, a lifeline. I was proud to help. I told myself independence could still exist alongside that help if I kept clear records and set limits. For a while it worked. I would log in, make a transfer labeled rent or utilities, and then return to my life. But patterns crept in. A small transfer here, a cash withdrawal there, a toothbrush, a plug for the heater, and eventually car fixes and private school payments for Amy that seemed to appear without explanation. The more I covered for them, the less they seemed to hold themselves accountable. My early 30s were full of late-night calls where Karen's voice was thin with embarrassment and Paul's explanations were muffled by background noise. I started keeping a private spreadsheet because intuition told me that promises alone would not protect me. The spreadsheet filled up with red marks. That spreadsheet turned into a suspicion that I tried to ignore until the morning of the ultimatum. Before that, life had settled into a routine of small migrations between work, volunteer hours with Lisa, who runs a community center, and dinners at Marco, the neighbor's place, when I needed to decompress. I noticed subtle signs over months. Amy wearing new shoes I did not remember giving her, a luggage tag from a boutique airline left on the kitchen table, and a faint perfume in the house that did not belong to Mom. I heard the drawer of pay stubs open and close late at night, the rustle of receipts, the clink of coins in a jar that used to be empty becoming an afterthought. Sensory details piled up. The soft scratch of a pen in Mom's hand when she wrote notes about money. The smell of motor oil on Amy's jacket after a supposed mechanic's job that never matched the receipts. The way Paul's voice would lower when the word money came up. I rationalized. I told myself that a joint account was family support, that I was doing the right thing by keeping it open. But there was an accumulation that felt less like charity and more like entitlement. Small transfers were explained away as emergencies. But emergencies had a rhythm and a cap. These did not. I made transfers labeled deposit, rent, help, and the momentary relief I felt watching the confirmation screen would be followed by a hollow setting in my chest. I remember the tactile sensation of tapping confirm, the click of the app, the soft vibration. It was a familiar ritual. I started to notice the pattern because I had become intense about my records. My private spreadsheet tracked transfers across months and categories until it painted a picture I could not dismiss. Then the incident happened that escalated everything. The text read like a headline and a betrayal all at once. Amy wrote, "You owe this to me." Then Dad sent a message saying family comes first, and you know what that means. And Mom texted almost immediately, "If you do not send the money now, you are not welcome here anymore." My reaction was a quick inhale and then a slow exhale that tasted like iron. I replied in the group chat, I am not funding this." Amy called. I answered. "Sarah, please," she said, voice brittle. "It's for the venue. We already paid deposits. You know how much this means." "How do you know how much this is?" I asked. "Because Mom told me," Amy said sharply. "She said you always help." "I help when there is a real need," I said. "This is not a real need." "You are cruel," Mom texted. Then a voice note with her sobbing came through. My phone vibrated against my palm like an insect. "You promised," Paul said in a voicemail left at 10:12 a.m. "We are ashamed to ask, but we need this." My chest pounded. I felt the old guilt like a pressure in my throat. In the background, the presentation was still happening, and I could hear applause through the glass. The sensory overload was deafening, the bright white glare of the conference room lights, the cold plastic of the water bottle under my hand, the low murmur of colleagues, the warmth of the coffee gone bitter, the sticky feeling on my skin as adrenaline took over. I clicked out of the meeting, walked into the hallway, and sat on a metal chair that made my spine feel brittle. I typed one sentence and hit send. "I will not be extorted by my family." That last word hung there like a verdict. After that message, the texts multiplied, and the threat of being disowned became louder. I wanted proof before any irreversible move. I called Sam at the local bank because he had helped me set up the joint account. "Sarah, are you sure you want to check the statement?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There have been transfers that do not add up." "I can pull the statements for the last 4 years and flag unusual activity," Sam offered. "Send me a secure authorization and I will get you copies." The taste of metal in my mouth came back as I signed the authorization. I asked Lisa to come over after work because I did not want to face this alone. "Bring the spreadsheet," she said, already protective. I felt the rough weave of her jacket when she hugged me. Her presence smelled like lemon soap and calm. That evening, the house felt too small. The sound of the fridge humming, the creak of the stairs, the faint echo of Amy's laugh from another room all became part of the noise that pressed in on me. When Sam sent the PDF of the statements, I opened it and the world narrowed to columns and numbers. My fingers tingled against the smooth paper printout. There it was, transfers labeled maintenance, deposit, emergency, each one flowing out of my account into cards and vendors I did not recognize, and recurring withdrawals to a travel agency and a high-end boutique under Amy's name. My stomach dropped. "How much is that total?" I asked aloud, though only Lisa and Sam were in the room. "About $32,000 across 3 years, Sam said quietly. "There are some transfers that have been blocked and reversed, but this is the net." I felt like someone had pulled a hand from my chest. The paper crackled as I gripped it. The phone notification came then, a bank alert showing a pending transfer for $1,500 that night. I remember the cold of the kitchen tile under my feet, the smell of the takeout I had not eaten, the texture of the chair's fabric under my thigh. At that point, I brought in Javier, a civil lawyer friend who had helped a colleague once. "If you want to pursue this legally, you have to document everything," Javier said, flipping through the printouts. We need to establish unauthorized transfers or misuse of a joint account. They used the joint account with my consent for a while, I said, but consent does not mean endless access. Lisa paced, running her fingers through her hair like a metronome. What if they claim it was family need? She asked. The papers will show how it was spent, Javier replied. We should request itemized receipts from vendors and transmit formal records requests to the bank. Also, document the messages. I recorded the voicemail from Dad where he threatened to cut me out of the will if I refused. Javier's eyes hardened. Blackmail and coercion have civil implications, he said. Not every family fight is a legal case, but this has a paper trail. I felt a weight shift under my feet. The smell of the lawyer's office was a mix of leather and coffee. The pen in Javier's hand left a faint ink stain on the authorization form, and the soft tick of the wall clock sounded like a counting down. We called the bank's fraud team and filed a notarized statement the next morning. Javier and I had a string of exchanges that were raw and practical. Can we freeze the account? I asked. You can request a block, he said. There are procedures, and a temporary freeze is possible while we investigate. Will they know? I asked. Yes, he said. They will be notified. Prepare for resistance. His voice was steady and firm. The confrontation with my family came with the weight of those documents. I remember walking up the front steps to Mom's house, feeling the gravel vibrate under my soles, smelling cut grass and the faint barbecue smoke from another neighbor's yard. I knocked, and Amy opened the door with a smile that did not reach her eyes. What are you doing here? She said. We need to talk, I said, about the transfers. The front room smelled like lemon cleaner and candles. I put the stack of statements on the table. I printed everything, I said. Look at this. Amy's mouth tightened. That is private banking information, she said. You have no right to accuse us. This is my account, I replied. These transfers were taken from my joint account and used for your lifestyle. Mom's face went pale, and she said, You always said family first. I said help when there was need, I answered, not a lifestyle. Voices rose. You have to understand, Paul said, trying to steady his tone. We did what we thought was best for the kids. Best for whom? I asked. You cannot use my account as a credit line. For a while, the room was a tangle of accusations and pleas. I counted the exchanges in my head like breaths. What about the mortgage payment? Mom asked, single tear tracking down her cheek. What about school? Amy said. We needed it. You used my money for vacations and designer purchases, I said, slamming a printout down. The paper fluttered. Show me the receipts, Amy snapped. We paid cash. We paid bills. The house felt colder than it had when I arrived. The tactile sense of the paper between my fingers, the soft scrape of a chair leg on hardwood, the distant drip of a faucet, all made the confrontation viscerally real. At one point, Ellen, our cousin who had come to mediate, said, This is not how family should behave, which felt like an accusation as much to them as to me. There was one piercing moment where the roles reversed, and I saw guilt in Karen's face. She reached out and touched my wrist with a hand that smelled faintly of hand cream. I never wanted to ask you this way, she whispered. I know it was wrong. Then why keep asking? I said. Why lie? She could not meet my eyes. Paul stood frozen, sweat at his hairline, and at that instant I felt both sorrow and steel. The exchange ended with Amy shouting and the sound of the front door slamming. I remember the tap of the doorknob in my ear like a punctuation. That night, I left with a small stack of documents and the taste of lemon cleaning fluid and old coffee on my tongue. I had to decide what independence looked like. Javier recommended formal steps. close the joint account, open a new account in your name only, change your passwords, and send a written notice to them stating the account is closed to shared access, he said. Also consider a cease and desist if threats continue. The sensory detail of typing the letter on my laptop at midnight remains clear. The hum of the fan, the soft glow of the screen, the weight of my hands on the keys. I prepared the notice, and then, the hardest thing I had done in years, I walked away. I closed the account and blocked numbers that had been used to pressure me. The bank required signatures, forms, and an affirmation of intent. Sam from the bank met me in a small office with beige walls and a poster about fraud prevention. "We can close shared access," he said. "It will take a day to process, and you can set limits so no transfers can occur from this point." I handed over the documents. "I want everything blocked," I said. "No more automatic payments, no more transfers." "We will mark your account and note the dispute," Sam replied. The tactile relief of stamping the final form felt like a ceremonial seal. I sent a formal email to Karen and Paul and Amy saying that the joint account was closed and that any further access would be considered unauthorized. They called, texted, cried, and threatened, but the bank had my authorization and Javier had instructed me on how to move forward. The day I hit send on the last email, I felt a kind of clean tiredness, as if I had finally closed a wound that had been open for years. 1 month later, things were raw and real. The physical consequences began to show. Mom had to call an electrician because she could not pay for a repair she had before. I heard through Marco the neighbor that they had cut back on weekend dinners out and had started selling small items to cover urgent bills. "I feel awful," Mom said in a voicemail. "We are sorry." I listened to it in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, the leather grain pressing into my palms, the radio quietly playing a song that used to make me think of summer. But I also felt a small, stubborn thread of relief. I had started therapy with Dr. Rivera, who helped me name the pattern of entitlement and guilt that had defined so much of my life. I enrolled in a financial recovery class on a site recommended by Lisa and began rebuilding boundaries. Amy found a part-time job and posted on social media about working evenings at a cafe. The first month was about stabilization, emotional and procedural. I changed passwords, set new limits, and filed formal reports of the transfers with the Consumer Protection Agency. Small sensory wins mattered. The crisp feel of new bank cards in my hands, the cold click of the mailbox closing with a certified letter, the soft hum of a group therapy session where I could finally say the word extortion without choking. 3 months later, the shift felt more structural. The bank had completed a preliminary review and flagged several transfers for investigation. Javier had drafted a demand letter requesting reimbursement and itemized receipts. "If they cannot provide proof of legitimate expenses, we can push for restitution," he said in a phone call I took on a subway with the wind of the city pressing through the car vents. Amy had started to contribute to her own rent and had been honest in one conversation with Ellen about how she had taken advantage. "I thought family would always cover me," she said on speaker as I recorded the call. I was wrong. The house at Mom's place had become quiet, and there was the sound of paperwork being shuffled instead of the clattering of shopping bags. I had made peace with losing the illusion of a seamless family safety net and gained clarity about my financial and moral boundaries. I began offering therapy sessions for people dealing with family financial abuse on the community board at Lisa's center and found it oddly healing to turn my experience into guidance for others. 6 months later, tangible consequences had settled into a new normal. The bank concluded part of the investigation and recommended partial restitution for certain transfers that lacked supporting documentation. While the legal process was slow and imperfect, the symbolic results were clear. Mom and Dad requested financial counseling and had started attending a budget class at the community center. Amy had a modest savings, opened in her own name, and a work schedule that matched her income. The family's mortgage stress remained, but it was now a challenge they faced with me removed from automatic bailouts. Emotionally, I had changed the most. I no longer woke with a lurch at every ping on my phone. I had regained independence and found recovery in therapy, in clear limits, and in the steady support of friends like Lisa and Marco and my cousin Ellen. The most practical lesson was concrete. Close a joint account when patterns of misuse appear, document everything, and do not confuse guilt with obligation. Love does not come with a membership fee. If you are in a situation like this, please record conversations that feel coercive, get copies of bank statements, consult a civil lawyer, and consider contacting consumer protection resources. If my story resonated with you, tell me in the comments how you would react. Say simply, "I would leave," or "I would pay," and start with "my turn." It helps others read quickly and builds a map of shared experiences. If you want more stories and practical steps about setting boundaries and recovering financial independence, subscribe and check the description for links to resources, including a financial recovery site, a recommended family therapist, and a civil lawyer directory. My life after that morning is not perfect. There were nights of regret and conversation with Mom that stung. There were hardships and awkward dinners and the slow paperwork of healing. But I regained my independence and my peace. I closed the joint account, I blocked numbers, I sought therapy, and I rebuilt my life with rules that protect my future. If you are carrying someone else's spending as a sign of love, please consider that limits are acts of care, not cruelty. Share your story below and subscribe for more stories of people who put their boundaries first and learned to protect their emotional and financial safety.